If you're a synth player, collector, or just an admirer of synthesizer music, you probably remember the first time you heard or played a synthesizer, and likely you remember your first synthesizer. In this First Synth video series, I've had some fantastic YouTube creators sharing their first synthesizer experiences, and today you'll hear from 4 more. I'll leave links in the description for this video to all 4 creators' channels. I would encourage you to please drop by and check out what they're doing if you don't already subscribe to them. And I'm proud to announce that today's presenters are Synthse Seeker, Glenn Maine, Bloom Music, and Synth Punk. I'll be back at the end to wrap everything up, but for now let's jump into the stories. Here's Synthse Seeker to kick things off.
Hey there, my name's Luke. I am doing business as Synthse Seeker on YouTube. Thanks, Matt. I'd love to have an opportunity to tell the story of how I got into synths, my first synth. I actually have to talk about 4 synths because my first synth wasn't really a synthesizer. My first synth was the Casio 403. I was 10 years old. My mother was a songwriter and a singer, and she took us to J.C. Penney's and pulled out her credit card and put that down on a Casio 403, brought it home because she needed a small home organ / keyboard to use with her songwriting. And I wasn't one of those kids who was forced to take piano lessons from age 6 or anything like that. I just got exposed to a lot of music, but that was my first synthesizer. It was in fact an analog synth. You just couldn't edit anything. It had a bunch of presets. But that was the first synth I ever laid my hands on. I don't still own it. It's long since gone, lost to the annals of time. But that got me to a place where I like this thing, this linear black and white keyed thing. All right. Shortly thereafter, maybe, a few more years, I ran into a Christmas gift from Radio Shack. It was the Casio SK1, I think, sampling keyboard, little tiny beast. I think I can still sing the demo song. If you hit play on the demo, it would play the song, and it would use whatever samples you had loaded into it. It could hold one sample, little crunchy, like 6-bit or 8-bit sample. And I will not sing that right now, even though I could if I wanted to. But that was sort of my experience with saying, okay, these keyboard things are cool, but here's something you could change the sound in if you wanted to by holding that microphone up to, whatever, the lawnmower, or you could burp into it. I mean, I was 10, 13 at the time. So, it was very Ferris Bueller as far as like sampling. And then those were sort of my world of keyboards. I was playing that Casio tone, had an SK1 stacked on top of it, making a little bit of music in my playtime as a kid. And then in middle school, I ran into the Juno 106. I was a member of our middle school jazz band, and the keyboard player, I was in the rhythm section, I played bass. The keyboard player was real excited one day because the band director came up and said, I got something new for the band, guys. Here we go. And he pulls out of this case a Roland Juno 106. And within about a half hour, the keyboard player, his name was Danny was playing Van Halen's Jump, right? So this is about 1984, 85, right? And he was playing the synth part from that horn bleeding Juno 106, although I guess that wasn't a Juno 6 that Van Halen used. But that was my first, here's a real synthesizer. And I had serious gas. I had gear lust for that thing. I wanted a synth from that point on. And a couple years later, beg, borrow, steal, my father... we had moved we had lived in Connecticut. We moved to Florida, in Sarasota, Florida, between Sarasota and Clearwater, Tampa Bay. There is a big music store called Thoroughbred Music. It's kind of like Sweetwater or Guitar Center, but it's a brick and mortar sort of place, big warehouse store. Took me there, and he bought for the family, right? But I was the primary user, a Roland D10. Because I wanted to make music on the computer, and I wanted to be able to have more than one sound playing at a time. So we went back and forth with the guy in the keyboard department, and he's like, you want this synth, the Roland D10, because it was 8-part multi-timbral, and so you could have 8 different sounds playing at any given time. Plus, it had drum kits as well on a 9th channel, MIDI channel 10. And we took that home. We took home also a copy of Cakewalk for DOS. It was Cakewalk 2.0, this MIDI sequencer, and a Roland MPU 401 ISA card that got slotted into the IBM PC XT, I think, is what I had as a hand-me-down. My father had installed this. It was like his work computer, and when they upgraded that, he bought it on the cheap from work, brought it home, and he would fiddle with it. And the guy was like, yeah, you just need to put this MIDI interface card in there, and then you connect the synthesizer to it, run Cakewalk, and be that as a sequencer. And that was my composing rig for probably the next 8 years. The next time I upgraded, I kept upgrading Cakewalk for DOS and using that D10 for years and years and years. Basically just creating music, releasing albums on cassette, copying it in a dual cassette deck, going to the local music stores and asking them, hey, can I stack these on the counter, sell them, $5 a pop. You guys get $1, I get the rest. And that's where it went from there, right? So that is the story of my first synthesizer. And I gravitated from that point. I'm definitely ensconced in this place where Berlin school meets prog rock meets film music, but that's another story entirely. So that's the shindig. Matt, thanks for letting me share that, and you all have a great week. Talk to you later.
Hello, my name is Glenn Maine, and Matt, thank you so much for inviting me to your YouTube channel to tell about my first synth. That's really, really cool, because I had to dig into my old stuff and just find my first synth. Actually, I'm sitting here with my Korg Poly 61. That was not actually my first synth. I had the Korg MS-10 actually first, but I don't have that anymore. I sold it along with my TR-808 when I was in high school, and yeah, 30 years later you can ask yourself, why on earth did I do that? But at that time, that was just a drum machine, an old drum machine. I wanted a new one because I bought the TR-505, I think it was back then. Anyway, I don't have the MS-10, but I have the MS-20 Mini, because I missed my MS-10 so much that I just had to buy MS Synth again. So it's here, and I use it mainly for some effects and stuff now. It's really cool. So actually my first synth that I could play polyphonic stuff I got when I was 14 years old. And at that time, that was back in, when I was 14, that was in 1983 actually. And I got to choose between this one, Poly 61, and the Roland JX3P. And I went for the Korg because I fell in love with the Korg Poly 6 years before this came out. So when this came out, I was like, wow, it's the Poly 6, but much cooler, in my opinion, back then, because this synth looked so yeah, hard word to say when you're Norwegian, futuristic, whatever, you know what I mean. It was like into the future with this synthesizer. So I decided to go for this one because the JX3P was more like you had a controller and lots of knobs, and I wanted a more clean synth. Of course, there was not so many knobs on this one as on the Poly 6, so you had to menu dive a bit to make some sounds, but it was quite easily actually, because there are not so many. I don't know if you can see it from there, but I have these number things here, which says like if I want to change the cutoff, it's parameter number 31 and I can change it. So it was a bit, yeah, it's not like instant when you tweak sounds like nowadays. You turn on different knobs all the time. Here you had to go one by one almost just to make the sound right. But I made some decent sounds back then, and it was so fun to take this out from the shell again. It's usually standing here collecting dust, but no, it's not dusty anywhere. Anyway, and it's still here, and it's a bit surprising because I did not change the battery in this one, so I think I have to do that pretty soon. Yeah, and I played in some bands back then. Where I used this, and I had my MS-10, and I also had this Super Session from Korg. That's a really old drum machine, or yeah. Now I have the MC707. It's a bit more cooler, but back then this was really cool. So my synth setup when I did live gigs on my own, because I had my first live gig when I think I was 14 or 15 years old. I had it in the gym at school, because we had this. Yeah, we collected money for starving kids in Africa and stuff, and some kids were selling, yeah, old things they had in the garage, or making waffles or lotteries and stuff. But I made a concert, so my synth setup back then was this one, Pulley 61, the MS-10, and the Korg Super Session, and I played Howard Jones songs. I remember it so well. I will make a video with my first synth setup, because Matt, you inspired me to bring out the good old stuff again, because I've been sitting here with this synth now, and it's just like, wow, it's so nostalgic for me to hear the good old sounds I made. Yeah, this was, I played in the band, and this the cool thing was I could play the bass at the same time as I played the melody, because on the MS-10 was monophonic, so there I couldn't do so much with it. I played some bass stuff and some solo stuff, and I remember on the new song from Howard Jones, I played the solo on the MS-10 and the organ on this Pulley 61, and the Super Session rhythm thing was grooving in the background. But anyway, it was so cool to have two hands on the keys, because I was used to play like this organ with two manuals and the bass bars and all that stuff, so I needed two hands to play. So when we could play, just can't get enough with. That was really cool, and Yasu and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a bit out of tune now, and the knobs are a little bit sticky, so I have to fix that. So just sitting here with this good old stuff takes me right back to my childhood. So Matt, thank you so much for bringing me back to my roots regarding synthesizers and stuff. So you actually inspired me to make a video of my good old setup with this one, with the MS-20, or yeah, MS-10 back then, but now the MS-20 Mini, and the Super Session, and maybe my good old JX8P or my Juno 106. I'm not sure, but I will make a video of my first synth gig setup. So I see you soon, and Matt, once again, thank you so much for inviting me to your wonderful channel. And people out there, if you haven't subscribed to his channel, do that now. See you soon.
Hey, my name is Donald Jordan. I have a channel on YouTube called Bloom Music, where I obsess about synthesizers and really anything synth adjacent. I want to start off by thanking Matt. I think this is a really cool thing that he's doing. I think it's an important thing that he's doing. Doing synth demos on YouTube is cool, but I think there's room for different types of content. I think it's really cool to have people coming out to share their stories and the love and emotion of synthesizers, because that's why we're all here, right? It's for the love of synths. So I think this is a really awesome and important project. I am going to cheat today. I'm supposed to talk about my first synthesizer, but I'm going to talk about my first two. I'm going to talk about my first software synth and my first hardware synth. And I think it's an important distinction because those are two very different experiences. And I also think it's a journey that will be, a lot of people will be able to relate to, because a lot of us start on computers, right? That's how we learn about synths. And we kind of, start with software synthesizers, and then our journey inevitably takes us to hardware. So hopefully this will be a relatable story. But I didn't really discover synths until I was in my 20s. So this is mid 2000, maybe late 2000s. But I was listening to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, a lot of The Fragile, which I love. It's probably my favorite album, if you can't tell by my decor. But yeah, listening to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, and listening to other stuff too. I mean, I'm listening to like Dre 2001 and Company Flow and some Wu-Tang, but I'm that and Nine Inch Nails, and I'm hearing these sounds and I'm like, what is that? Like, I know those are not instruments, like quote unquote real instruments. Like, what are making these noise? Like, I have to know. So I go online and I'm asking people, like, what is making this bass sound? I know that's not a bass guitar, but what is that? Asking questions like that and just kind of flailing online for a while. But eventually, inevitably, finding my way to synthesizers that are making these noises. I was never really able to play an instrument very well. Like piano, no way. Guitar and bass, I was never really good at it. I couldn't pick it up. But now I found this instrument that, it wasn't just about playing, it was about discovery and sound design and like making your own sounds. And, every single day you could pick this thing up and make something that nobody's ever heard before, something truly unique. And that was like mind blowing to me. It was this whole new world. And I'd always felt kind of lost in music. And now all of a sudden, like, this was it. Like, I knew synthesizers were going to be my thing. So I kept reading online and getting suggestions and like reading other people's experiences until eventually I landed on my very first ever synthesizer, being Reason, the software Reason from Propellerhead. And I had it installed on like a $200 like 10-inch netbook from 2007. I can't even believe that the software even installed on it, but I was able to make some really, really cool stuff with that thing. Like, the only music that I've ever created and actually released was an EP that I made completely within Reason on that netbook. Like, all the synth sounds, all the drum sounds, like everything came straight out of Reason. And I definitely hold it in a special place in my heart because of that. It was just so cool. But, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just twisting knobs and, twist a knob, move a cable, and like all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. I can make something out of that. I can work with that. And that's what was really fun about it. I didn't know what CV stood for, let alone what it did, but I knew if I moved a cable around and then twisted some knobs, I get some really cool sounds. When I go back and listen to that stuff, it's really interesting because there are sounds that I know I would never make today. Like, when we sound design with intention, sometimes we end up in the same place a lot, and sometimes it's the happy accidents that happen when we don't know what we're doing. Some of that stuff is just the coolest stuff that we'll ever make. But, you know, I loved my reason, but I kept reading online and reading about synths online, and now I'm hearing you got to get hardware. You know, you haven't really used a synthesizer unless you've used some hardware, gotten your hands on some knobs. I'm like, do I really need this? Do I really need to spend $300 or $400, you know, which is a lot of money for me at the time, on a hardware synth? But you keep reading it, and finally I was like, okay, yeah, I gotta get one. I gotta see what all the fuss is about. So I ordered my first hardware synthesizer, which was the Korg MS-2000R. I cannot explain the first time I put my hands on that synthesizer and started turning knobs, like the experience of that, the revelation of that. It was so special. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but there is something to reaching out and touching a synthesizer. There's an energy to it. It's an emotional experience. It's more than just you. It's kind of a dance. There's this old video that I uploaded, and to this day I don't know why I uploaded it, but it's of me using the MS-2000, you know, using the multi-timbrality. I'm like playing chords over this sequence, and I'm using the mod sequencer, and I'm like using the LFO to modulate the noise to make like hat sounds. And it's, you know, it's not great. It's fine, but I'll revisit it from time to time, just to go back and be like, oh yeah, that's where it all started with my old MS-2000. Now, unfortunately, I don't still have the MS-2000. I got rid of it. I've actually bought and sold it 3 times. I had the original one that I had back in the day, and then I had another one that I got maybe 10 years ago or so, the keyboard version, and then got rid of that. And then most recently, I had it like 2 or 3 years ago. And that time I got it and, you know, made some content for the channel, like some patch diaries and like a retrospective review. Because I feel like it's a synth that's doesn't get its due. Like, it's kind of underrepresented on synth YouTube. I think it's not as appreciated as some of its peers from the same time. But yeah, I always end up selling it because of the 4 voices. That's why I get rid of it. It's just, it's such a limitation. It's such a bummer that they never released something with more voices, but I always end up letting it go for that reason. Now, I will say, even though I've bought and sold it 3 times already, I probably will end up with another one someday, because they're just so good and they're so fun to use. They sound so good. Honestly, I think it is Korg's best synth since the Poly 6 in 1981. I don't think they've topped the MS-2000 in any of their new synths, and I would take it over any of the modern Korgs. I would take it over any of the Korg logs. I just think it's better. I think it makes some awesome sounds that those synths are not capable of. I mean, the filter sounds so good. The filter sounds good for today, let alone 20 years ago. The modulation matrix is awesome, you know, better than a lot of synths that come out today. The oscillators are great, you know, even beyond the digital waveforms, you know, the virtual analog oscillators, I don't know, they just sound really good, and each of them has the shape parameter that you can change and modulate to just get a lot of texture and movement. I don't know, it's just really, really cool. So yeah, it's awesome, and I will almost definitely end up with another one, even though I've already bought and sold it 3 times. I don't need it. With all my other synths, I don't need an MS-2000. I have no real need for it, but it's so good. Like, I just want it, and I know I'll end up with another one. I'll occasionally think about it from time to time, like I miss it. You know, it's like it's like I'm missing an old friend. which I know is like a really weird thing to say, but I don't know, it's crazy. Like that's what synths do to us, and it's a beautiful thing that I can't really articulate. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. So anyway, thanks again, Matt, for putting this together. I think it's a really awesome project, and I will see you all on the Bloom Music channel. All right, have a good one.
Hey everybody, it's me, it's John, also known as Synth Punk. Yeah, can you believe it? And anyways, my friend Matt Wright, he's on Matt Wright Music. Yeah. And he asked me to make a video talking about my first synthesizer. Yeah, he's done quite a few of those videos, and I said, sure, yeah, I'd like to talk about my first synth. So yeah, my first synthesizer, what was it? The first synthesizer I ever came into contact with was when I was in high school. So when I was a junior in high school, my friend Pete had, guess what? A Yamaha CS15. Yeah. Now, over here behind me, I have a Yamaha CS10. And I predict in the future I will be getting a CS15. Because honestly, the CS15 is a great synthesizer. And yeah. What else can I say? So that was like 1982, right? Yeah, because I graduated high school in 1983. And yeah, Peter was a great keyboard player. He had a Yamaha CS15 and a Yamaha CP30 piano. And another synthesizer that I came into contact with was when my band was rehearsing in the same building. We were renting a building, not the whole building, just a room in the building. And all these other bands also rented rooms. So I was constantly around synthesizers, but I was a guitar player. And so I just got enamored with what they could do. And so, I mean, being a guitar player, what I tried to do is, use effect pedals to make the guitar sound like just really different than just a guitar sound. I'm going to talk about the synthesizers I came into contact with. Okay? Not owned, but I'm going to just do this little side hustle. Okay, in the building, there were 3 bands with keyboardists in the building. One of them was my friend Kenny. Kenny had an ARP Quadra. He had an ARP Quadra. I'm what was I, 16, 17 years old. And so, yeah, Kenny had an ARP Quadra, and he had the Moog Prodigy, and my friend Tim Mish, Tim had a Rhodes Chroma, he had a Prophet 5, I think he had a CS80 for a short time. I actually have his Korg Radius right there, because Tim passed away about 13 years ago. Let me think. Then there was another keyboard player named Doug. Doug played in my friend Tim's band. And Doug had a 6-track. Yeah. Doug had a sequential circuit 6-track. And, you know. He had a Moog Rogue. He had a Prodigy. I'm trying to think of the other ones he had. I think he had a CS15 as well. But, you know, I mean, like, I was immersed in it. I was immersed in synthesizers. I was not getting away from synthesizers because they were all around. And like, our building was next to a music store, and basically they sold primarily Yamaha keyboards. So there were DX7s there, the TX802, the CS15, the CS10, the CP30s, you know. So, and I remember when the DX7s came in, they were like, you can't touch that. You have to get somebody to walk you through it, you know. I mean, because I think that was like a $2,000 synth back then, and it really didn't really appeal to me because of the membrane buttons and all that. And so anyways, so it wasn't until 1983 that I picked up, I bought it from a friend. I picked it up from a friend. I got it for $400. I got an ARP Odyssey. Yeah, an original ARP Odyssey. And so this is not, obviously, the original ARP Odyssey. It's not. But it sounds darn good. It really does. And this, when I was like 18 years old, this was it. This was it. The ARP Odyssey. My first synthesizer. So anyways, let's talk a little bit about synthesizers. Specifically, the ARP Odyssey.
You know, the 2600 still had a lot of flexibility because it had patch cords and so forth. But the truth of the matter is, you could get 90% of the sounds that you wanted without any patch cords. And so I said, why don't we make a synthesizer that's specifically designed for the stage that has no patch cords? And, you know, it won't have the ultimate flexibility of being able connect anything to anything, but it'll have all the useful stuff, the things that you hear over and over and over again. And yeah, and that worked out really well. I mean, that was an incredibly popular stage instrument. And we made thousands.
So there she is, my ARP Odyssey, next to my Mofo, and my Mini Moog. But what I wanted to show you is something I grew up with, and that is Captain Antonil. And he did the keyboard solo for Muskrat Love on the ARP Odyssey. So let's play it out. Let's end this video with Captain Antonil and Daryl Dragon, the keyboardist, on the ARP Odyssey. Thank you for having me, Matt Wright. Thanks.
As always, tremendous thanks to the contributors who shared their stories and experiences today. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are 3 previous videos in this same series. I encourage you to check those out if you want to hear more stories. I'll leave a link to that playlist below. So I appreciate you stopping by and spending time here. Would encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't had a chance to do so. Please leave a like and feel free to comment below. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.